My wife planned to leave me after secretly selling our home, thinking she had the upper hand. I discovered her scheme just in time, purchasing a new place without her name on the deed. When she returned expecting comfort, she found only an empty house with no welcome left for her. But that wasn't all. What happened next was unbelievable. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout-out in our next story. Today's special shout-out goes to Jamie Howard from Florida. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I used to think home was made of more than walls and floors. I believed it was laughter drifting through the kitchen late at night, the soft brush of a hand on your shoulder when you passed by, the shared sigh at the end of a long day. For a while, that illusion held me steady. My wife, Emily, had a way of filling the house with warmth, her laugh brightening even the grayest mornings, her quiet hum as she watered the plants along the windowsill. It was the sort of life I had always wanted, a place where everything felt safe and sure. But somewhere along the way, that feeling turned cold, the warmth of our shared spaces replaced by something brittle and thin. I remember the first time I noticed the shift. We were sitting in the living room, Emily curled up on the couch with her phone pressed to her ear. She spoke in hushed tones, words I couldn't quite catch, her face turned away as if she could hide the truth in the shadows. I tried not to overthink it. She had her own life, her own worries. But even then, in the back of my mind, I felt something slipping. It was in the way she stopped reaching for my hand during our evening walks, the way she always seemed to be somewhere else when I spoke. Still, I told myself it was just stress. Work had been heavy for both of us. She had long hours at the office, deadlines stacked like dominoes ready to fall. I knew the strain well enough. I'd felt it too. So I kept quiet, choosing to believe in the comfort of our routines. I'd come home to the smell of her cooking, rosemary chicken or simmering soup, and for a moment, it almost felt like the warmth was still there. But even those dinners began to feel like rehearsals. We sat across from each other at the table, the candles flickering between us, and the silence stretched longer than any conversation. I suppose I wanted to believe that love could hold us together, that the years we'd spent building this life were enough. I spent hours fixing up the house, painting the front porch a soft blue, hanging wind chimes that whispered in the breeze. Emily used to say she loved the way the chimes sounded, like little bells ringing out our shared hopes. But I noticed one morning that the chimes had gone silent, tangled and still, and I couldn't remember the last time she'd looked at them. Our home had always been a reflection of us, or so I thought. Every photo in the hallway told a story. Vacations to the mountains, birthdays with too much cake, quiet Sundays spent reading in the sunroom. I would stand there sometimes, looking at those photos, searching for a clue to where it had all gone wrong. But the smiles were frozen, snapshots of a happiness that had long since faded. When I think back on it now, I see all the little signs I chose to ignore. The calls she took behind closed doors, the late nights she said she spent at work but never mentioned when she came home. The way she started talking about our house like it was a burden, too big, too much to keep up with. I thought it was just her way of venting, but each complaint was a chisel, tapping away at the foundation we'd built. I tried to bring it up one evening as we sat on the back porch, the warm summer air carrying the scent of lilacs from the garden. "Emily," I said, my voice softer than I meant it to be, "do you feel different about us? About this house?" She didn't look at me. She kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, the last of the sun painting the sky in bruised pink and gold. "You're overthinking it, Daniel," she said, her tone flat. "It's just a house. Don't make it more than it is." But I couldn't stop making it more. I couldn't stop feeling like everything we had built was slowly crumbling under the weight of her silence. I wanted to hold on, to find some way to fix whatever had cracked between us. I told myself if I just worked harder, if I just loved her enough, she'd come back to me. But love, I learned, can't hold up a house that's already been sold out from under you. I kept busy in those weeks, pouring myself into work, fixing up little things around the house that no longer seemed to matter. I watched as she grew more distant, her eyes always somewhere else. She stopped telling me about her day, stopped asking about mine. I wondered if she even noticed the way I watched her, trying to read the thoughts behind her careful smile. At night, I lay in bed beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. It was the only time she seemed at peace, and I would lie awake, wishing I could find my way back to whatever it was we used to share. But in the quiet of those nights, I knew. I knew she was already gone in all the ways that mattered. I didn't know then that she was planning to leave me entirely. I didn't know she'd already found a way to turn our home, our carefully built sanctuary, into something she could cash in. I didn't know she'd decided to sell it, that she'd carved me out of the life we'd made without a word. But the pieces were there, waiting to be seen. And when I finally opened my eyes to the truth, it was like stepping into a room that had already been emptied out, every echo of love replaced by the cold certainty of betrayal. I used to think home was more than walls and floors. But as I stood in that house, watching the distance in Emily's eyes grow deeper every day, I began to understand that home is only ever as strong as the people who live in it. And sometimes, no matter how much you want to believe in it, the foundation has already cracked beyond repair. The day I discovered Emily's betrayal didn't come with some grand revelation. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that should have been mundane. I was working from home, the steady hum of my laptop a comforting distraction from the heaviness that had settled between us. Emily had left early, saying she had a meeting across town. I watched her go, that familiar knot in my stomach tightening with every step she took out the door. Even then, I told myself not to overthink it. I was tired of fighting shadows. But as I sat at the kitchen table later that morning, an email notification popped up on her old tablet. The one she'd stopped using months ago but had left lying around like a relic of simpler times. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe it was the restless part of me that couldn't stop searching for answers. Maybe it was just the way her name in the subject line seemed to whisper of something I wasn't supposed to see. My fingers hesitated on the screen, but curiosity or desperation won out. It was a message from a real estate agent. The subject, offer accepted, congratulations. My heart thudded in my chest, a dull, sick rhythm. I read the email twice, each word like a stone dropped into water. It was addressed to Emily and spoke of closing dates, final walkthroughs, and the price she had negotiated. The house I thought we shared, the one I had painted and repaired and loved, was being sold out from under me. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring as the words sank in. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, the ground I thought was solid giving way beneath me. It wasn't just the house, it was everything it meant. Every memory, every moment of laughter or tears, every quiet night spent dreaming of the future we thought we were building. All of it reduced to a line in an email I wasn't supposed to see. My hand shook as I set the tablet down. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to storm out of the house, to track her down and demand to know why. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there in the silence, feeling the weight of her lies pressed down on me. I thought about all the times she'd brushed off my questions, all the nights she'd come home late and offered no explanation. It wasn't just stress, I realized. It was a plan. I spent the rest of the day and a daze, moving through the house like a ghost. The walls felt closer somehow, every creak of the floorboards a reminder that I'd been blind to the truth. I wondered how long she'd been planning it, how many nights she'd lain awake beside me, calculating the best way to cut me out of my own life. The thought made my stomach turn. That evening, when she finally came home, I tried to act normal. I don't know why, maybe I needed more time to think, to understand the full shape of her betrayal. She walked in with that practiced smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes anymore. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down by the door. "How was your day?" I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth and forced a smile. "Fine," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "Yours?" She shrugged, her expression unreadable. "Long. I'm exhausted." She didn't meet my gaze as she headed for the kitchen, the lie hanging in the air between us like smoke. I wanted to scream at her right then, to demand she tell me why she thought she could steal the home we'd built together and still come back here like nothing had changed. But I held my tongue. I needed to be sure, needed to see just how deep her deception ran before I made my move. So I waited. I watched her move through the house with a calm that I envied, every small gesture a reminder that she thought she had the upper hand. She chatted about her day as she reheated leftovers, her tone light and breezy. I nodded along, pretending I didn't know every word was a performance. That night, lying beside her in the darkness, I thought about what it meant to be betrayed by the person you trusted most. I thought about the promises we'd made to each other in the early days, promises to build a life together, to always fight for each other. I wondered if any of it had ever been real, or if it had all been as fragile as the trust she'd broken. The next morning, I woke early, the light just beginning to slip through the curtains. I watched her sleep for a moment, her face peaceful in a way that felt almost cruel. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with, soft, warm, familiar. But the woman in that email was a stranger, someone who would sell our home behind my back and expect me to thank her for the privilege. I knew then that I couldn't let her take everything from me. I couldn't let her walk away with the life I poured my soul into while she traded it for a better deal. I felt something harden in my chest, a quiet resolve that I hadn't felt in years. She might have started this game, but I wasn't going to let her win it. So I began my own plan. I started making calls, quiet ones, the kind she wouldn't notice. I found a realtor, explained my situation in careful, measured words. I didn't tell anyone else. I didn't want to risk her finding out. Every step felt like a small rebellion, a way to reclaim something of what she'd tried to steal. As the pieces fell into place, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't driven by anger, though there was plenty of that, simmering just beneath the surface. It was something deeper, a kind of cold clarity. I knew now that love wasn't enough to save us, and I was done pretending it was. She had chosen her path, and I would choose mine. The hardest part was acting like nothing had changed. I still kissed her goodnight, still asked about her day, still pretended to care about the small complaints she shared over dinner. Each word tasted like ash, but I forced myself to keep the mask in place. I had to until I was ready. I thought about the silence that would come when she realized what I'd done, the way her voice would catch when she saw there was nothing left for her here. It was a cruel thought, but it felt like justice. She had gambled everything on my ignorance, certain that I would never see through her careful lies. But she was wrong. The house I thought was ours had become a battlefield, every quiet moment a skirmish in a war I never asked for. And in the quiet of those early mornings, as I lay beside the woman who had already decided to leave me, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let her win. Not this time. I spent the next few weeks walking a tightrope, every conversation with Emily a careful balancing act. She still moved through our home like she owned it, her laughter echoing in rooms that already felt like they belonged to someone else. She didn't know that every time she smiled at me, I saw the email in my mind, a paper trail of betrayal she had tried to bury. In those moments, I felt a strange mix of pity and disgust, as if I was looking at a stranger wearing the mask of the woman I used to love. I didn't tell her what I knew. I didn't rage or beg. Instead, I began to move in the shadows, weaving my own threads in the quiet hours she never thought to question. I met with the realtor she didn't know about, a calm man named Mr. Harrison whose gray hair and measured tone made me feel like I had an ally in this war I hadn't wanted to fight. I told him everything, the betrayal, the hidden sale, the hollow marriage that was crumbling around me. He didn't look surprised. Maybe he'd seen it all before. Maybe stories like mine weren't as rare as I liked to believe. "We'll find you something," Mr. Harrison said, his voice low and steady. "Somewhere you can start fresh. But you need to act quickly. If she's already pushing the sale through, you don't have much time." I nodded, my heart thudding in my chest. "I don't want her name on it," I said. "Not a single piece of paper." "Understood," he replied. "We'll keep it clean." I spent my lunch hours touring houses I never thought I'd be looking at alone. I walked through empty rooms that smelled of fresh paint and possibility, imagining what it would feel like to stand in a space that was mine alone. No echoes of Emily's laughter, no memories of promises she'd broken, just walls and floors that didn't hold the weight of our history. It was a bittersweet relief, a chance to rebuild something from the ground up, even if it meant tearing out the roots of the life I'd known. At night, I lay awake in the bed we still shared, listening to the soft sigh of her breath. I wondered if she was dreaming of the new life she'd planned without me, or if she even cared that she was stealing the ground out from under my feet. I wondered if she saw me as an obstacle or simply as collateral damage, a casualty of her ambition. The anger in me burned slow and steady, a quiet fire I fed with every step I took to protect myself. I signed the papers for the new house on a Wednesday afternoon. It was a small place, nothing grand, but it had a warmth to it, A promise that felt honest, at least. I stood in the empty living room, my fingers tracing the cool surface of the kitchen counter. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that made it more than enough. I didn't tell anyone about the purchase, not even my brother Mark, who'd always been quick to offer advice or sympathy. This was something I needed to do on my own, something I needed to claim as mine and mine alone. In the silence of that empty house, I felt a flicker of peace for the first time in months. The air smelled of new beginnings and freedom, and I let it fill my lungs like a bomb. Back at the house Emily and I still shared, I kept up the charade. I smiled at her over dinner, asked her about her day as if I didn't already know she was planning to leave me behind. She had grown bolder, I realized, almost smug in the way she carried herself. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd already written the ending to our story. I let her believe it, let her have her illusions. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the same room where I'd once imagined us growing old together, she mentioned the sale for the first time. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice calm, "maybe we should downsize. It's just too much space for us these days, don't you think?" Her eyes met mine, but there was no softness there, no trace of the woman I'd married. I forced a smile. "Maybe you're right," I said, my tone even. "It does seem like too much sometimes." She nodded, satisfied, and leaned back into the cushions. "I think it'll be better for both of us," she said. "A fresh start, you know?" I wanted to laugh at the irony of it. A fresh start. Her words echoed in my mind as I thought of the keys in my pocket, the new address that was already waiting for me. She thought she'd taken everything from me, but she didn't realize I'd been busy reclaiming what was mine all along. In those last days in the house, I let go of the weight of our shared past. I took down the photos that lined the hallway, the smiling faces that had once felt like a promise. I packed away the books we'd bought together, the little trinkets we'd picked up on trips that now felt like someone else's memories. It was painful, but it was necessary, a way to cut the last ties to a life that was already gone. On the night before I left, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring at the bare walls. The quiet was almost soothing. I thought of all the meals we'd shared at that table, all the late-night talks, and the laughter that had once made these walls feel like home. It was strange how easily it had all faded, how quickly it had turned to dust in my hands. Emily didn't notice the change in me. She was too busy playing the part she'd written for herself, calm, in control, certain of her victory. But in my silence, I felt stronger than I ever had. I wasn't the man who would beg her to stay. I wasn't the fool she thought she could outmaneuver. I was done pretending. The night before I walked away, I made one last promise to myself. I wouldn't let her rewrite the ending. I wouldn't let her turn my life into a footnote in her story. She could have her plans and her schemes, but I would have my peace. And that, I realized, was worth more than any house or any memory we'd shared. The day I left the old house for good, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders I hadn't known was there. I woke early, the sky still streaked with the pale light of dawn, and lay there for a long time, listening to the quiet. Emily was still asleep beside me, her breathing slow and steady, oblivious to the fact that everything she thought she'd secured was slipping through her fingers. I rose without a word, careful not to wake her. My bags were already packed, tucked neatly in the trunk of my car the night before. I moved through the house one last time, each step a silent farewell to the life I'd once believed was unbreakable. I ran my hand along the banister I'd refinished myself, traced the faint cracks in the kitchen tiles we'd always meant to fix but never did. It was strange how much history could live in such small imperfections. When I stepped outside, the early morning air was crisp and smelled of wet earth. I stood in the driveway for a moment, looking back at the house that had been my refuge and my prison in equal measure. It didn't look any different, but it felt hollow, stripped of the warmth it had once held. I didn't feel sad or angry, just resolved. I was done with the half-truths and the cold silences, done with pretending everything was fine while the ground crumbled beneath me. I drove to my new place with the windows down, letting the wind carry away the last traces of doubt. The drive was quiet, the roads empty, and the sun just starting to rise over the horizon. I felt a flicker of something like hope as I pulled into the driveway of my new home. It was modest, no sprawling yard or grand entryway, but it was mine alone. The thought brought a small, fierce smile to my lips. I spent the morning moving boxes from the car into the empty rooms. Each trip another small act of reclamation. The house smelled of fresh paint and possibility, a blank slate waiting to be filled with whatever future I chose. I moved slowly, taking my time to savor the quiet. It was a relief to stand in a space that held no memories of Emily, no echoes of laughter turned to lies. By noon, I had unpacked the essentials, clothes, a few dishes, the worn leather chair that had always been my favorite. I stood in the middle of the living room and let the stillness wash over me. There was no Emily here, no reminders of what we'd been. Just me and the echo of my own breathing. I didn't tell her I was leaving. I didn't leave a note or a message. I wanted her to come home to the emptiness, to the hollow shell of the life she thought she controlled. I wanted her to feel the silence, the final, unspoken response to her betrayal. When I pictured her walking through the door, expecting to see me waiting with the same weary smile, I felt no guilt. She'd gambled everything on my ignorance, certain she could pull the rug out from under me and leave me with nothing. But she hadn't counted on my resolve. She hadn't counted on me choosing silence over confrontation. The hours passed slowly in my new place. I busied myself with small tasks, hanging curtains, stacking books on the shelves. Each little act felt like laying a new foundation, one that no one could take from me. I thought about the conversations we'd had in the old house, the arguments that always ended in the same cold silence. Here, there was no one to fight with, no one to disappoint. Just me and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the quiet that had become a kind of balm. That evening, I sat on the back porch with a beer in my hand, watching the sun slip behind the trees. The air was warm, filled with the soft buzz of summer insects. I let the silence settle around me, felt it wrap me in something like comfort. There was no one to fill it with questions or accusations, no one to tell me I was overthinking everything. Just the peace of knowing I had finally taken back what was mine. I imagined Emily standing in the doorway of the old house, her eyes scanning the empty rooms. I imagined the moment she realized I was gone, that there would be no tearful confrontation, no last-ditch effort to save what she had already destroyed. I didn't need to see it to know it would hurt her more than any argument ever could. The finality of it, the silence that said everything words couldn't. When the sun finally set, I sat in the dark for a long time, letting the quiet wash over me. I thought about how much I had given to that old house, to that life I'd built with her. How much of myself I'd poured into making it a home, only to realize too late that you can't build something real on a foundation of lies. I thought about all the nights I'd spent wondering if I was enough, if I was the problem. And in the cool, dark air of my new beginning, I finally let go of that doubt. I didn't need her to tell me why she'd done it. I didn't need to hear her excuses or her carefully rehearsed apologies. I knew enough. She had chosen herself, and I had chosen to walk away. The rest didn't matter. That night, as I lay in my new bed, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. I thought about the way she would come home to an empty house, the way she would call out my name and hear nothing in response. I thought about how she would have to face the consequences of her choices alone, just as I had faced the quiet truth of our broken marriage. The silence I left her wasn't cruelty, it was the only answer left. In that stillness, there was no more room for lies, no more room for manipulation or half-hearted promises. Just the final, unspoken truth. I was done. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The first few days in my new home felt surreal. I would wake up in the mornings and, for a moment, forget where I was. I'd open my eyes to the soft light filtering through unfamiliar curtains and feel the strange disorientation of starting over. But then, as the memories settled back into place, a quiet certainty would wash over me. This was mine. All of it. Every inch of the empty rooms, every breath of the still air. And for the first time in what felt like years, I could breathe. The first morning after I left, I found myself pacing the living room with a cup of coffee in hand, the soft scrape of my footsteps against the hardwood floors oddly comforting. There was no Emily to ask me about my plans for the day, no half-hearted small talk over toast and orange juice. Just the gentle hush of a house that belonged to me alone. It was a relief I hadn't known I needed. But in the quiet, there was also space for reflection, space I'd avoided for too long. I thought about the way Emily had looked at me in those final weeks, her eyes hard and distant, as though she'd already decided I was no longer part of the life she wanted. I thought about all the times I tried to bridge the distance between us, only to be met with walls she'd built so carefully I didn't even realize they were there until I was standing on the outside looking in. There was anger, of course, a slow burn in my chest whenever I let myself dwell on it. But more than anger, there was a strange sense of freedom. She had tried to sell me out of my own life, tried to leave me with nothing but memories and regrets. But here I was, standing in a house that was mine, feeling the echo of silence that was finally on my terms. The friends who knew about the move reached out cautiously. My brother Mark called that second morning, his voice low and careful. "How are you holding up?" he asked, as if I might shatter if you pushed too hard. I told him the truth. "Better than I expected," I said. "It's quiet, but it's a good quiet." "I'm proud of you," he said after a pause. "Not many people could walk away like that. You're stronger than you think." I didn't feel strong. I felt raw, like every nerve had been scrubbed clean and left exposed. But I also felt steady in a way I hadn't in years. Mark didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer them. It was enough that he knew I was done with the life that had been slipping through my fingers for far too long. Emily called on the third day. I let it ring until the voicemail picked up, her voice on the recording suddenly hollow and strange. "Daniel, I came home, and where are you?" she said, her voice trembling just enough to let me know she hadn't expected this. "Call me back, please." I didn't call her back. I didn't know her that. She'd made her choice when she decided to sell the home without a word, when she looked at the years we'd spent together and saw nothing worth saving. The silence was all the answer she needed. She tried again that evening, and the next day, each voicemail a little more frantic, a little more desperate. "Daniel, we need to talk. I don't understand why you're doing this." I listened to them in the dark of my living room, the glow of the streetlight outside washing the walls in soft gold. Her words were just noise now, static that no longer reached me. By the end of the week, the calls slowed. The last message she left was clipped, her voice cold and tight. "Fine. If this is what you want, then I hope you're happy." And with that, she fell silent. It was the final thread of our marriage snapping in two, the last echo of her voice fading into nothing. In the quiet that followed, I found myself thinking not about what I'd lost, but about what I'd gained. The house was small and spare, but it was mine to fill with whatever I chose. I spent my evenings on the back porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, letting the night settle around me like a soft blanket. There was peace in that, a sense of calm I hadn't felt in so long. I didn't rush to fill the rooms. I liked the emptiness, the promise it held. Each day, I'd choose one small thing to make it feel more like home. A new lamp in the corner, a stack of books on the coffee table, a fresh pot of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Slowly, the house began to feel like a reflection of me, stripped of the weight of a life that had grown too heavy to bear. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think of Emily and wonder what she saw when she came home to the empty house. Did she stand in the doorway, searching for some sign of me? Did she feel the weight of her choices pressing in on her, the cold echo of a house that no longer welcomed her back? I'd like to think she did. I'd like to think she finally understood that you can't build a life on lies and expect it to stand. But I didn't dwell on her for long. The more distance I put between us, the clearer it became. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an explanation or an apology. I had found something stronger than revenge in the quiet of my new life. I had found the certainty that I didn't need her to make me whole. The echo of silence in the house was no longer a void. It was a space to breathe, to heal, to figure out who I was without her shadow always at my back. I knew there would be lonely nights ahead, moments when the memories would creep in and try to pull me back. But I also knew I was done letting her define what home meant for me. In the stillness, I found my own strength, a quiet, steady pulse that didn't need anyone else's permission to exist. Emily had gambled everything on the belief that I would stay blind, stay tethered to the dream she'd decided to sell. But in the end, it was her who came home to nothing, and me who found the courage to walk away. The first time I felt like I truly belonged in my new home was a rainy Saturday morning. I woke to the soft drum of rain on the roof, the gray light slipping through the curtains like a gentle hush. I lay there for a long while, listening to the steady rhythm of the storm, feeling the peace of it settle in my chest. It was the kind of quiet that had once felt oppressive, but now it felt like freedom, a gentle reminder that the past no longer had any hold on me. I got up and made coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen as I watched the rain wash the world clean outside my window. The old house had always been so full of noise. Arguments that never reached resolution, conversations that skirted around the truth. Here, there was only the soft murmur of the rain and the warmth of the mug in my hands. I took my coffee out to the small porch, pulling an old blanket around my shoulders. I watched the drops beat and run down the railing. The world outside softened and blurred. In that moment, I realized I didn't miss the life I'd left behind. Not the hollow laughter, not the strained silences, not the way I'd been made to feel like I was never quite enough. What I missed was the person I had been before I let all of that weigh me down. And here, in this small house with its bare walls and open spaces, I felt like I was finally meeting that person again. I thought about Emily sometimes, not with anger, but with a kind of distant curiosity. I wondered if she had found another house to claim as her own, another life to build in the ruins of what we'd shared. But those thoughts didn't linger long. They didn't have power over me anymore. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was a boundary, one I'd drawn to protect myself from the slow erosion of a love that had never been as real as I'd wanted to believe. I spent my days rebuilding in small, deliberate ways. I planted herbs in clay pots on the kitchen windowsill, their bright green leaves a promise of growth. I hung pictures on the walls, landscapes I'd always loved, photographs I'd taken on solo hikes in the mountains. Each small act felt like a declaration. I was still here. I was still capable of finding beauty in the world, even after everything had fallen apart. Friends stopped by, one by one, their visits cautious at first, as if they were afraid to intrude on the fragile calm I'd found. Mark came by on a Sunday afternoon, his arms full of groceries he insisted on bringing. "You need to eat more than takeout," he said with a grin, but I could see the relief in his eyes when he saw how settled I seemed. We sat at my small kitchen table, eating sandwiches and talking about everything except Emily. I didn't need to tell him what had happened. He could read it in the quiet strength I was beginning to wear like armor. "You're doing good, Daniel," he said as he stood to leave, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Better than I've seen you in a long time." I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my bones. "I am," I said simply. "I really am." I didn't hear from Emily again after that final message. No more calls, no more voicemails. It was as if she had accepted the silence I had left her, the final, unspoken statement of my decision. And in that silence, I found the answer I had been searching for all along. I didn't owe her anything more. Not my words, not my forgiveness, not even my anger. The day I went back to the old house for the last time, I didn't go inside. I stood at the edge of the driveway, the for sale sign still staked in the lawn like a marker of all the things we'd lost. The house looked smaller than I remembered, its windows dark and empty. I felt a pang of nostalgia, but it was fleeting, washed away by the steady certainty in my chest. That place was no longer mine. The memories we built there had already turned to dust. I turned away without a second thought, my feet carrying me back to the car, back to the life I had chosen for myself. In the evenings, I would sit on the back porch and watch the sky darken, the stars winking into view one by one. I thought about how easy it would have been to stay. How easy it would have been to let her lies define me, to let the weight of our shared past keep me rooted in a place that no longer felt like home. But in that quiet, I realized that sometimes the hardest choice is the one that sets you free. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future would hold or who I would become in the years ahead. But I knew this. I was done giving my love to someone who saw it as a bargaining chip. I was done tying my worth to the walls of a house she'd tried to sell without a second thought. I was done waiting for an apology that would never come. In the end, it wasn't about the house or the betrayal. It was about me, about the man I wanted to be, about the peace I wanted to claim for myself. And as I sat in the soft dark of my new home, the night air cool against my skin, I felt a quiet pride in the choice I'd made. Emily had gambled everything on the belief that she held the power in our story. But she hadn't counted on the one thing she couldn't take from me, my own resolve, my own boundaries. The final, unshakable truth that sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or retaliation. It's moving on in silence, leaving behind the life that no longer served you. And in that silence, I found my peace. A boundary she would never cross again. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing to the channel for more gripping tales of family drama and betrayal, and don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I'd love to hear how this story resonated with you. See you soon in the next one.